So a couple days ago, UST depegged, sending the entire crypto space into an utter apocalyptic spiral. Here's exactly what UST is, what happened, and what might happen next. UST is a stablecoin, and stablecoins are always supposed to be worth an exact stable price. In the case of UST, it's always supposed to be worth $1. But unlike other stablecoins, UST achieves its stability algorithmically, meaning it's not actually backed by a dollar. And this algorithmic peg is enforced by Luna. The way that it works is you're always able to redeem Luna as if UST was at $1. So if UST actually falls below $1, say down to 70 cents, and you go to buy Luna, you're buying Luna as if UST was at $1. So for example, if one Luna is worth $100, you could sell that one Luna and receive 100 UST, regardless of what the price of UST is at. On the other hand, if you had 100 UST and you wanted to buy one Luna, even if UST was at 50 cents, you'd still be able to buy one Luna, because Luna is always redeemable for UST as if UST was always at $1. Meaning right now with UST down at 50 cents, someone could go buy one UST and go redeem it for $1 worth of Luna. This is called arbitrage, and it's meant to be a way for the market to help UST keep its peg. It obviously hasn't been working very well, and we'll get into why in just a second. First, it's important to understand exactly how other stablecoins work. Other stablecoins don't operate in this same way. First off, you have stablecoins like DAI, which are collateralized, meaning they have assets to back up that dollar value. In the case of DAI, it's a basket of assets that includes Ethereum, Bitcoin, and USDC. Another stablecoin would be USDC, which is kind of like the gold standard of stablecoins, where every token is actually backed by $1. Then there's of course Frax, which has fractionalized backing, meaning it's not fully collateralized, but it's actually fractionally backed, kind of how our US banks operate. The assets it currently uses to back its price would be USDC and FXS. And of course, lastly, there's USDT, which used to say that every token was backed by $1, but later they changed that and said it's actually backed by reserve of different currencies and loans. But with USDT, nobody really seems to know. There's a lot of different suspicions when it comes to USDT, and really nobody actually knows. So DAI is backed by a basket of assets. USDC actually has every token backed by $1. Frax is fractionally backed by USDC and FXS. USDT, nobody really knows at this point, and UST was backed by just Luna, which itself was backed by nothing. Now, because UST didn't actually have to back their tokens with anything, they were able to grow pretty rapidly, becoming one of the largest stablecoins on the planet. And as UST grew, so did Luna. And if you aren't familiar with Luna, Luna does act as the currency of choice for the Terra Luna network, which is sort of like a blockchain similar to Ethereum. And the biggest use case for UST is something called Anchor, which Anchor is kind of like a DeFi savings account where you can store your money in UST and receive about 19% annually on your investment. And Anchor was the primary driver of UST's growth and success, because obviously if you're going to hold a stable coin, why not hold UST and get paid 19% annually just to have your money sitting there doing nothing? Now, recently over the past year, there's been questions of the sustainability of Anchor, because 19% is a pretty high yield to kind of sort of come out of nowhere. Part of that yield was supposed to come from loans that Anchor would lend out to borrowers, but unfortunately what ended up happening is Anchor grew very quickly and a lot of people were using Anchor, but not as many people were actually taking out loans to actually cover the cost of all these other people who are getting paid 19% interest. It became a bit of a mess that eventually caused them to actually have to lower the interest rates for Anchor, and everyone kind of thought that was that. And in reality, all of that really didn't have that much to do with the current situation we're in. The current situation is more a story of greed, pride, and a giant monetary experiment that was too big to fail until it did. And the story goes like this. On May 8th, the Luna Foundation pulled liquidity from Curve in anticipation of the big 4-pool launch. 4-pool is a massive pool of liquidity on Curve that's meant to defend against UST depegging. At the same time that the Luna Foundation pulled this liquidity from Curve, leaving it vulnerable, an attacker uses 350 million UST to drain the liquidity pool on Curve. This initially starts the depeg and pushes the price of UST down to 97 cents. The Luna Foundation responded to this by taking their Bitcoin holdings, which they had a lot of Bitcoin that they had bought up, and they lent it out. They took out a loan against it and then used the funds that they raised from that loan to defend the peg of UST. And during all this, everyone assumed the Luna Foundation's response would be that they would actually sell their Bitcoin, causing massive sell pressure on Bitcoin and potentially causing a massive crash. Even though Luna Foundation didn't do that because everyone thought they were going to do that, the price of Bitcoin ended up crashing. And because of all this drama and uncertainty happening with UST, this causes a ton of people who hold, maybe their life savings in Anchor to get nervous, panic, and then go sell their UST, causing a run on the bank. And this causes the liquidity of UST to dry up even further, causing the price to absolutely plummet down to at 1.60 cents. In response, the Luna Foundation deploys their newly raised funds to try to get UST back up to peg. And at first this starts to work where, the price of UST goes up from 60 cents to 70 cents to 80 cents. But after the dust settles and the Luna Foundation's essentially exhausted all their funds that they've raised, they were only able to get UST up to 93 cents. And during all this, because Luna's so tightly knit with UST and everyone's freaking out about what's going on with UST, and because Luna acts as that arbitrage opportunity where, if the price of UST drops, people could trade it for Luna as if, the UST was still at $1. The price of Luna absolutely plummets, going from over $70 down to $30. During all this, Do Kwon assures everyone that they have a plan that's going to restore the peg. Everyone starts speculating about the Luna Foundation potentially raising some funds from some VCs to fight all this, but the Luna Foundation isn't able to respond quick enough, and the price of UST drops from 93 cents down to 30 cents before it goes back up to about 50 cents. Then eventually Do Kwon releases his plan, which it revolves around the mechanisms of how Luna arbitrages with UST. Basically, the system was working way too slow and people weren't actually able to arbitrage in the right way to actually bring the price back up to peg. And so they were pushing through a proposal to increase the base pool and the pool recovery to bigger amounts so that people could do this at a faster rate and hopefully cause the price of UST to repeg. But this ends up causing rapid sell pressure on Luna, where Luna goes from $30 all the way down to 80 cents. And keep in mind, at one point at its height, Luna was worth $115. During all this, UST doesn't stabilize and it actually drops further, going from 50 cents down to 33 cents. And then from there, it goes back up to 50 cents and everyone's just going crazy. So the question that we're kind of left with is why attack UST in the first place? Who was this attacker and why did they do all this? And really, that's kind of hard to say. A lot of people have speculated on who the attacker was, what the reasoning was behind the attack. Most people agree it probably had to do with shorting, that they were either shorting Bitcoin or they were shorting Luna or they were shorting both, and that they intentionally wanted to cause the price of UST to collapse so that they could make a bunch of money shorting. And if that is indeed what the attacker meant to do, and that's what they indeed did do, they likely made a fortune during all this, probably coming out with upwards of $800 million. Anyways, that leads us to the future. What will happen from this point forward with UST and Luna? Many people, or pretty much everyone, assumed that Luna and UST were just too big to fail. Even recently, some of UST's biggest critics praised the recent move to launch Vorpool, saying that that would likely fix a lot of the problems revolving around UST. But of course, nobody predicted or foresaw the fact that UST would get attacked during a moment of weakness, causing the entire system to unravel. You got to keep in mind that it took a ridiculous amount of money to actually perform this attack, and very few people would have the expertise, the timing, and that amount of capital to actually get away with it. And I don't know that anyone could predict what's going to actually happen next with UST and Luna, but I'll give it my best go. As far as Luna goes, it's definitely going to take a beating, and it definitely could go a lot lower than it's currently at. But there is the reality that Luna does have utility outside of UST. There is the Luna network, which is actually a pretty decent network in the crypto space. So I think in some form, Luna will likely survive and recoup from all of this, though I'm sure will take a lot of time. There's also the fact that there's a lot of big money that invested into the Luna ecosystem and invested into UST, and they have a lot riding on this. And I think those people aren't gonna let this whole thing go down without a fight. Speaking of UST, it's currently at the time of this recording around 50 cents, and I still think that there's a chance that we actually see UST repeg. Although how that happens, when it happens, and what everything will actually look like when this, goes down, I have no idea. I don't think the Luna Foundation at this point currently has the funds to enforce a repeg, so the peg would have to be restored organically, which I think could take some time. And maybe once things have settled and the peg has gotten closer to repegging, the Luna Foundation can maybe raise some funds and throw some money at it to actually lock in that peg again. It's also worth noting that it's completely possible that we don't see it repeg. Again, nobody really knows at this point. It's really uncharted territory. I know that Do Kwon will give everything he has to restore this peg. I know that he's a really smart guy, and out of anyone that could possibly pull this off, he would be one of the people that could. He's got all the right friends and connections to make it happen. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of people with a lot of money that want to see this thing fixed. I suppose we'll see. There's no doubt that in my mind that this is going to leave a massive mark on the cryptocurrency space. I'm sure every other stable in the space is taking notes. They're learning, they're reinforcing their policies, they're looking for weaknesses. And if Luna and UST do somehow survive this whole thing, you can bet that their policies are gonna change. I would guess that they're gonna start backing their UST with some sort of collateralized asset if they end up, surviving this whole thing. And I think it's gonna take some time, but as a whole, I think crypto will come out of this stronger. I'm doubtful we'll see that happen anytime soon. I think it's gonna take a while to rebuild any sort of trust in the crypto space after this event. But ultimately, what doesn't kill the crypto space does eventually make it stronger, smarter, and a little bit more innovative. If this video was helpful, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments or want to add to this, or if there's anything I missed, let me know in the comments below. And if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button. And you gotta also hit the little bell next to it if you want to actually be notified each time I release a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.